Hello, everyone. Welcome to Fearfully and Wonderfully Me, a podcast designed to help you become the leader you are destined to be. Welcome to Change Happens Part 2. This is the second episode on a short series I'm doing on one of the books the book that I co-wrote with Mac a couple years ago, Change Happens, Leading Yourself and Others Through Change. And I'm not reading the book to you on these podcast episodes, but really sharing some of my thoughts around the principles that Mac and I talked about in the book. So certainly a different perspective. But last episode I talked about nothing fails like success and how we, when we experience success, we tend to get complacent, and that's dangerous because things around us are changing and changing quickly sometimes. So today's episode is on the impact of change, because the impact of a change means the end of something familiar. And, that can bring some sadness with it because it's an ending, but it also can bring joy and potential because it's a beginning. And when we learn to look for the positives, we absolutely will find them. When we look for the negatives, we're going to find those too. To those who look for opportunities instead of just the challenges in dealing with change, we'll find them. I can remember, it's been several years ago, but when I got ready to leave the job I was working at in corporate compliance and start off on this new chapter of my life, that was a huge change. That was ending a career and starting a new career, or calling, as I like to say it, starting a new chapter. And it was an incredibly exciting time, but it meant a lot of changes. It meant a lot of changes personally. It meant a lot of changes professionally as well. And that it brought with it a little bit of sadness. And sure, it was an exciting time, and it brought with it a lot of excitement as well. But I definitely knew that the impact of that change was going to mean there were some endings. I had. It was a huge transition to go from working in a large hospital environment where I talked to so many people throughout the day, interacting with people, to go to working at a home office when I'm not speaking and traveling. And so that was a huge change. Personally, it meant, downsizing our lifestyle. And I've shared that with you on a previous episode, how when Mac and I got really passionate about starting this business and what we do today, we had to give up a lot of things. And, there were some ramen noodle months where we sold our house and sold our cars and really put all of our investment into the business and developing ourselves. And there was one year I went an entire year without getting my hair cut because that was something I could cut out. That was an unnecessary expense. And now I know some of you are thinking, getting your hair cut is a necessary expense. Well, at the time it was something that I could cut out. And we really sacrificed a lot during those changes. So it meant a lot of change on a personal level. And it meant a lot of change professionally. And so the impact, I think a lot of times when a change is occurring, we often focus on the negative impacts instead of looking for the positives. And I realize that's a natural human thing, because when change happens, it's natural for us to be a little concerned or worried or even afraid. And I'll talk about that in some future episodes of why that is and how we can overcome that. Because when change is happening, we first have to lead ourselves positively through the change. And how we do that is going to impact our influence with other people. And that's just a reality. Years and years ago, when I first started working in a job, and the person that hired me, we went through the interview process, and I was really excited to start working there in that position. And 6 weeks after I did, the person that hired me resigned. 6 weeks. Now I was still in my orientation period. I had barely gotten to know just a few of the ins and outs of the job. And so 6 weeks after being hired in that position, the person that hired me resigned. And so suddenly that meant a whole lot of change. It meant a whole lot of uncertainty. It basically meant that the department I was working in was going to be moved into another department so that, there would be someone who was a manager over that department, and a whole lot of changes, a whole lot of uncertainty. And, having worked there only 6 weeks, I didn't know a whole lot of people. I didn't have a lot of relationships built. And so it was incredibly scary. Like my whole world rocked upside down when I started that job, and it rocked upside down again 6 weeks later when my manager resigned. Now, I'm glad that person made the right decision for them. And they needed to. We all should make those decisions that are right for us. And it was a good move for her in the season that she was in with her kids and everything. And I absolutely understand that. But my point here is that when change happens, there's always going to be some impact, and it's going to impact not just ourselves, but also the people around us. And how we look for the positive impacts is going to determine whether we come out of it with more influence or less. And that's certainly a possibility. Mac loves to say, when change happens, we can whine or we can shine. And none of us really want to set out to be a whiner. We don't want to be known as that person who's always complaining or whining about something. We want to be known as the person who's shining, who's outstanding, who's better than average, right? I know that that's true about you, or you wouldn't be listening to a podcast and trying to grow and develop yourself. And so my point here is that if we can just bring our awareness to the positive impacts of change, change isn't always good, but here's the thing. If nothing ever changes, nothing ever gets better. Now, certainly there are changes that you're not going to be able to control in life, and maybe you can't see any positive outcomes in that situation. But you can always choose to be positive about it. And sometimes that means being not vocal about the negative possibilities. That's one of the biggest things that can decrease our influence with the people around us. When we start whining and complaining when changes happen, when we start being a negative voice or an amplifier for negativity, then that decreases our influence with positive people. So think about that, because when changes happen, and most of us don't like change unless it's our idea. I think I said that in the last episode, but it's absolutely true. Like I don't really love change, or I would tell you that I didn't really love change. But Mac might come home one day and find me rearranging the furniture in the living room. And he'd be like, "What is this? I thought you didn't want to make changes. Why are we just rearranging furniture?" But see, I loved that. That was my idea. I was all excited about that. But if he started to rearrange the furniture, oh no, I wouldn't want to embrace that kind of change. And I've learned that change can be positive. I've learned to embrace it and look for the good opportunities in it. I've learned to be positive even when I can't see that there are good opportunities. But most of the time they are there. We just have to learn how to leverage them. And so as changes go on, I challenge you to look at them as opportunities. Look for the positive impacts in change. I shared with you on last week's episode how the gym that I work at just got bought out and is under new ownership. And one of the big changes will, I'm sure, be changes to some of the classes that I go to and the schedule, and there'll be different types of classes and things like that. And I'm able to see that as a positive. Now, it might mean less of the classes that I love, but I don't know that. And so I could spend the next few weeks worried about it, wasting my time and energy worrying about, will this class or this instructor at this time slot no longer be available? But I really cannot control that. So when change happens, it's so important for us to focus on what we can control and influence. Because if we spend all of our time and energy worrying about the things that we can't impact or influence, all we're doing is wasting that time and energy. We cannot do anything about it. So why worry about it? Sometimes I challenge some of my clients, if I'm coaching them and they're worried about something or they've got a lot on their mind, I'll get them to write down on a sheet of paper. Just write down every single thing that you're worried about or concerned about, everything that you're thinking about. And spend, a few minutes and just dump it. Just do a brain dump right there. Every problem that might happen or potentially happen or something that's weighing you down. And then circle the ones that you can do something about. Circle the problems or situations that you can positively influence. And then get rid of the rest. Scratch them out, erase them, do whatever you got to do. Rewrite the list so all you have is a list of the positive things that you can influence. Whatever you got to do to bring your awareness to just the things that you can impact. And don't worry about the rest of them, because you can't control them anyway. So worrying isn't going to help. Being concerned about it isn't going to help. It's just time and energy, and your time and energy is too precious. I like to say, don't give it any headspace. Don't give it any headspace. If you can't influence it, don't give it any headspace, right? You're going to find it's almost like a sore tooth that you want to just keep running your tongue over it. And for whatever reason, we do that. And it's kind of like the same thing mentally. When something is worrying us or stressing us, we almost find a impulse to just keep coming back to it. But every time you find yourself coming back to it, stop and turn your attention intentionally back to something you can affect. Change always impacts us. The only question is how. But a lot of times how we are affected is determined in a large part by our attitude. And our attitude is determined by our thoughts about the situation. Let me say that again. Change always impacts us. The only question is how. But how we're affected is determined by our attitude in a large part. And our attitude is determined by our thoughts. What are we thinking about the situation? What are we thinking about the situation? Because the moment we start thinking negatively about, oh man, this is going to be all these changes, it's going to be inconvenient, I'll have to learn something new, I'll have to blah, 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 blah. Whatever it is, those things may be true. It may be inconvenient. You may have to learn something new, but I almost positively guarantee you there is something that you can find positive about the situation when you look for it. If nothing else, if a change is challenging you and you're feeling like you're going to have to get outside your comfort zone or learn something new, the positive thing about that is you'll learn something new. You'll develop your skills and yourself in some small way. And that's a good thing, because that's growth, even if we don't like it. The thing about growth is it's usually not fun, right? I can tell you, as I look back over the greatest seasons of growth in my life, none of them were fun. That's just a fact. Because most of our growth happens when we are stretched or uncomfortable or challenged, and we're growing in order to meet that challenge. But that stretching, that tension, that challenge isn't comfortable. It's downright uncomfortable most of the time. Every race that I've ever won, every time I've set a personal record for finishing a little faster, it's always been one of the toughest things to do, because it means I have to push, I have to challenge myself, I have to not quit when I get tired. And it's the same way relative to our growth in our personal and professional life. When we are faced with a new challenge at work, maybe you started a new job and you're going to have to learn a new computer system and some new skills and new names of people at work and, new policies. And yeah, it's an incredible season of growth, but it's a little bit stressful. And that's okay. That's where growth happens. Neale Donald Walsch said, life begins at the end of your comfort zone. Now, I don't know if life begins there, but I know that growth begins there. And so growth can be such a positive thing in our lives. It helps us because it helps us increase our capacity to increase our results. Well, when you think about that, if for no other reason than changes happen and they challenge us, it's going to help us increase our capacity for the future. And so look for that. If you can't find anything else about the situation, look for the positive aspect in that and focus on that. Until next time. Hey everyone, if you've enjoyed this podcast episode that is based on the book Change Happens, Leading Yourself and Others Through Change that I co-wrote with my husband, Mac Story, you can find details, more about the book, more about our speaking programs on this topic. Jump on my website, riastory.com/change. So that's riastory.com/change. And you can find a link from that. You can order the book right there from either the website or from Amazon. If you've got Amazon and you like Prime, free shipping, you can order it directly from Amazon, but you can also get it from my website if you'd rather have a signed copy. And if you're an audiobook listener, you can listen to an audio sample of Change Happens right there from that website page. So again, riastory.com/change.